What is something illegal you have done and got away without getting caught? A long while back I was working in a country that was experiencing a bit of a civil war. The area we were moving into had a strict embargo on fuel and they were seizing all of it coming into their territory. I called a buddy that had access to a poop truck, you suck porta-johns with, and we transferred the fuel to that. One thing you can count on is the laziness of the lowest ranking member working security as well as nobody wanting to deal with human waste. We drove 18,000 liters right past them and through their search lane. Over 10 grand in fuel. Edit 1, for the people pming me and complaining about the profit margins. At the time the fuel was sold well above what you could top your car off at week prior. The split was minimal and if caught we really would have only been out the cash we paid for on the rental of the poop truck. You always got to be looking out for that next hustle even if it is apparently chump change to some redditors. I say might, have a few pence from work in my drawer at home. This is not an admission of wrongdoing, nor can I attest to how they got there. If they're even there. I brought 2 or 3 Cuban cigars back to the US from Montreal once. When we cleared the border I turned to my parents and used my favorite line from Futurama. Guess what your accessories to? I stole my own car from the tow impound lot. Best part was getting the certified letter months later that they were going to auction it if I didn't come and pay for it. My friends and I didn't pay for our dinner at Steak and Shake this past weekend. I stood waiting at the register trying to pay for 20 minutes but no one came to take my money. It was 12:30 AM before we left. One day, I was driving to my ex-wife's parents' house by myself. They lived in a small town right off of the freeway. Now, on the freeway I was driving about 80 miles per hour, 130 kilometers per hour, which was standard for most drivers. When you pull off the freeway, it immediately drops to 25 miles per hour, 45 kilometers per hour. So, I pull onto this main drag and start driving through the town. I'm about a mile down when suddenly I notice a police car pull up behind me. I look down and see that I am driving at 45 miles per hour, 70 kilometers per hour. A few things hit all at once. First, I couldn't afford a ticket. I was 20 miles over. I would have ended up with a $200 plus ticket just because I failed to decelerate. I was only 3 blocks from my in-laws, and the officer hadn't turned on his lights yet. For reasons only known to me, I immediately pulled over, turned off the car and started walking. The officer pulled up behind me, not knowing what to do, but still with no lights turned on. I just kept walking without turning around. I get to my in-laws and tell them what happened. They tell me that I have to go back for my car, so I do. The officer was gone. No consequences whatsoever, never received a ticket in the mail, never heard a thing. I would never, ever do it again. And that's how I got out of a major speeding violation. Assisted in semi-stealing a car. Almost 2 decades ago my cousin calls my dad and says his car broke down. As my dad has friends with heavy equipment he figured my dad could get a trailer to tow it on. So my dad, my uncle and I go pick up a flatbed tow truck from a friend of his, then drive 2 hours to pick up the car. We find it near where it should be on the side of the highway, so we load it up and go to a rest stop to secure it on the truck better. As my dad and my uncle are attaching straps I'm looking at the car and notice something is odd. My cousin's car, late 80s Audi, had broken speakers for whatever reason. They all stopped work, so instead of replacing them with normal speakers he used house tower speakers, big ones at that back seat and passenger seat. I'm noticing there aren't any tower speakers in the car. I pointed this out and they stop and start looking at the car, then checked the plate number. They don't match. Cousin had a vanity plate. My dad immediately hooks the call, raises the bed and lets it roll off into a space at the rest area. We hop into the truck and drive off to find the car. We find it less than a mile away. Audi reliability jokes aside, what are the odds of two identical Audis same year, color and even rims and tires being broken down that close to each other? Stole a Blue Angels flag from the hangar they were parked in. When I was in the Navy, the Blue Angels visited the air base I was stationed at. They proceeded to kick all of our planes out of our hangar and I had to fix our birds out in the rain. In a fit of contempt, on the last day they were there, I went into the mess and stole the flag hanging from the overhead beams. I still have the flag and wear it like a cape from time to time. I once kept a dead otter in my freezer after finding it on the side of the road. In the UK this can get a hefty fine and prison time without a license. Once I found out, I released the dead otter into the wild. It was a bit like Free Willy but with less movement. I'm just here looking for the comment that says murder. When I was a teenager, my Labrador got out of the yard and I finally found him at the pound with a bullet in his shoulder. I had to put him down. I inadvertently found out who did it. I spray painted his Corvette. After he got it repainted, I did it again. Editing for clarity. This was a small town in the late 70s. I did tell the cops when he was shot, but we didn't know by who. They said they could do nothing. As far as I remember, even when I found out who did it, they said they couldn't help me. I found out who did it because my sister went to a party and a guy there was talking about a dog he shot. He lived in the same block where animal control picked my injured dog up. Of course I took my dog to the vet, but as a poor 16-year-old, I did not have the funds needed for surgery. If I recall correctly, it was $400, which would have been a small fortune for me. I had the vet put him down. He was a sweet lab. I bawled my eyes out for weeks. One of the local cops was a family friend. He put 2 and 2 together, and after the second paint job, he stopped by my work and mentioned what happened to this guy's car, and looked at me and said he hoped it wouldn't happen again. I took the hint and left him alone after that. This all happened over 40 years ago, but to the best of my recollection, that is what happened. Worked at a car dealership, broke many finance and insurance fraud laws on a daily basis for years. Most finance managers do and may not even be aware or it. I stole a piece of obsidian from biology class. At the next lesson, biology teacher came to our classroom and forced us to admit who stole an obsidian. But I didn't. Stole some candy when I was 6 years old at the corner store in 1967, the summer of love for candy. I hid it behind a sock ball in my hand. I even showed the sock ball to the owner, and said, "You like my sock ball?" I still feel remorse. He was a nice gentleman. I accidentally shoplifted some pudding cups once. I was at Target and was buying a couple of large bags of dog food which were in the basket part of the cart and several smaller items that were in the top part of the cart. I had tossed the pudding cups into the basket part before I put the dog food bags in and forgot they were there when I put all the smaller items on the belt to be rung up. They were hidden from view when the dog food bags were scanned. I saw them when I was putting the dog food bags into the trunk. If the lines weren't so long, I would have gone back to pay for them, but 20+ minutes for a 99-cent item, I can live with that. If it were a more expensive item, I would have returned to pay for it. I trespassed a condo car park to see an expensive car. I pretended I lived there. I once overslept for an oral English exam. So I forged the letter I received with the date, and moved it to following week. Showed it to my English teacher and she said it was probably a mistake, but I had to show it to the school dean as well to get approval for a reschedule. I showed the forged letter to him and he instantly found a mistake I made in the letter and just casually said that the letter looked typed over. I was sweating bullets at that point, because forging a letter for an exam is a pretty harsh offense and could have gotten me suspended. But he just shrugged it off and gave me permission for a reschedule. I guess since I wasn't a troublemaker, he just gave me a pass. The dean was one of the cooler teachers at school though. He loved SpongeBob, and if he gave you detention work, you had to make a SpongeBob figure with a sponge and such. Like and subscribe for more content. And remember to check out Reddit.